All right, you guys, welcome back. Now, in my last video that I uploaded, I alluded to an experience I had a couple years ago where I was stalked by what I believe was a mountain lion on my way to my deer stand in the dark one morning. It was where we were rifle hunting up in northeastern Minnesota. And I haven't shared this story with anyone publicly. I've told my family and friends about it, obviously, when it happened, but it's kind of a weird topic, and I really haven't wanted to talk about it, just because. But a lot of you guys were asking in that last video about it, and I thought, you know what, it might be good to share with you guys what happened. A lot of you guys hunt in similar areas that I do, and even the same parts of Minnesota that I do. So it's good for you guys to have an awareness, and I just think it's time. I feel like it's time I need to share what happened a couple years ago. So how this went down was I was walking to my deer stand up in northeastern Minnesota where we rifle hunt up at our rifle hunting camp up there, which is kind of on that western side of the Arrowhead region. And to set the stage here a little bit, we four-wheel in about 2.5 miles off the highway to get back to a cool little off-grid camp we have back there, a little off-grid cabin. And then from there, I go another almost mile north. So I'm pushing 3.5 miles off the nearest road, and there's no roads in any direction for a long ways. It's just vast wilderness, beaver swamps, clear cuts, aspen cutover regions, things like that, old logging roads, that type of country. Beautiful land up there, incredibly remote, rugged, untouched, undeveloped. It's really amazing. Untouched by, I guess, urban sprawl, I should say. It gets logged periodically, of course. But so I'm up in a wilderness setting where we hunt up here, and it was pitch black out. I left the cabin. I was going to get out there. I don't get out super early. Some guys say they get out there an hour before first light. I don't do that. I try to get out there a little bit before legal shooting light so that I'm all suited up and settled down and quieted down just before legal light. And so my hike up there, though, is probably a good 40-minute walk from the cabin and half hour to 40-minute hike from my cabin in the pitch black. And so when I leave the cabin, I've got my hunting rifle on one shoulder, I've got a big pack on my back, and I'm in usually just like long underwear and a t-shirt with kind of a shell type garment, my blaze orange, and then I've got my headlamp. Now, that particular year and up until that point, I had always bought the really low lumen headlamps because I don't want to spook the deer, right? So I had a really kind of dim, dull headlamp to try to make minimal impact in the woods. I took off from the cabin. My dad went that way, my brother went another way, the other guys in camp all went different directions, and I go my way. And I'm alone, and it's pitch black, and I'm a long ways from the cabin. The other thing is, there's no cell service up there, or when there is, it's very poor. You could send a text and it might not go out for, hours before the person might get it. So there's little to no cell signal, so it's not like you can just call someone. But anyways, I was about 3/4 of a mile north of our cabin, and in the pitch black, I was going through a big, we call it a cowhorn cedar swamp. That just means those big, leaning, mature cedars. I was in a total thick, mature cedar swamp. A lot of you guys who have walked through a white cedar swamp know what those are like. They're silent, they're quiet, they're soft, moss, and there's just these big, mature, kind of leaning trunks of cedars, and it's just a closed canopy. It's like a little jungle in there. And this particular morning when I was walking to my stand, I was just doing my thing, headlamp down, rifle over this shoulder, and I was just walking in the dark. And I heard a little noise. I heard like some leaves crunching and some footfalls kind of off to my right, kind of to my flank and a little bit in front of me. And I thought I must have bumped a deer. That was the first thing that popped into my head. I've bumped dozens and dozens, I don't know, maybe more deer in my life walking in the dark. And I kind of heard the footfalls and the leaves crunching, and I figured, spooked one. I was like, great, there's a deer up here. There's a deer around me. That's awesome. And so I was excited, and so I kept going, and a few steps later, I heard it again, kind of right off my right flank here and a little bit in front of me. And then kind of a little bit of a chill ran down my spine, because I was like, I've never had that happen to me ever before, and I've been out in the woods doing this now up there since I was 12, so shoot, almost 25 years I've been doing this now, 25 seasons, and And I heard that the second time now, and I just kind of stopped because I was like, that's really strange. I've never heard. Usually when you bump a deer, they crash off and they're gone, and I never hear them again. But this one stayed with me, and I was like, that's kind of strange. And so I looked with my headlamp over there, and I could just see. I was kind of just scanning these tree trunks, just these big kind of grayish, shaggy bark, like white cedars. And I was just kind of scanning them with my headlamp, and I didn't see anything. And I just thought, that was kind of weird. It didn't sound like it was that far away. It sounded pretty close. And I thought, well, maybe it was a fawn, and it thinks I'm a doe, its mother or something. And I was like, it might have been kind of a fawn stumbling around over there. Anyways, so stars are out, again, pitch black. I got my little cone with my headlamp here, and so I keep walking, and it was another few steps more I took, and I heard it again, a third time. And this time, I'm like, okay, something's up. Something's out there. This is getting really weird now. So I stop again, and I just immediately look up with my headlamp. This is the third time I've heard this now, kind of the crunching leaves. There's kind of some ash leaves in these cedar bottoms and different things, and I could just hear these footfalls right over here somewhere. And this time, the third time when I look up, I could see, or the third time I heard it, I could see a set of glowing yellow eyes right over here, probably, 25 yards from me, if that, 20 to 25 yards. And now I've confirmed it, and I go, okay. And I know it's a predator of some sort. I can see the glowing eyes sitting there, and the first thing that popped into my head was timber wolf. And I mean, the wolves are thick as flies up there, and I've encountered wolves walking around in the summertime up there doing salt licks and working on deer stands. And so I'm like, okay, this must be an immature timber wolf, and it's trying to figure out what I am. And I still was really not that worried about it. I just thought, it's a wolf, it's trying to catch my scent, it's trying to flank me so it can get my scent, and then once it figures out that I'm a human, it'll take off. That's what I was thinking. And so I'm just kind of standing there, gun still on my shoulder, and I've got my headlamp pointed into the dark, and you got just these like bright lit tree trunks from my headlamp, and then just a set of glowing yellow eyes kind of off and to my right over here. And so I just kind of stop, and I'm like, I'm just going to give this thing time. I'm glad we see each other now. I haven't spooked it any more than I already have, and or startled it. I was like, this thing's going to figure out what I am and take off. And so I just kind of waited and waited there a little while now, just staring at it with my headlamp. And then all of a sudden the eyes start moving kind of right to left, and then they would kind of disappear and then reappear, and then kind of disappear and then reappear. And it was working its way right to left, and then eventually it got right dead in front of me and stopped right on my walking trail. And I could still just see the yellow eyes. And so now I'm like, all right, I'm kind of wanting this thing to go. I'm starting to get a little bit anxious. Like, why isn't this thing leaving? This is kind of starting to get a little bit weird. So at this point, I just took my gun off my shoulder and just kind of held it like this. And when I walked to my deer stand in the dark, I put 4 rounds in my clip, and I popped the clip into my 270 bolt action, and that's how I walk into the dark. Nothing in the chamber. And so I'm just kind of waiting, and I'm like, all right, this is starting to get a little bit weird now. It's just kind of, it's hanging out. It's getting a little bit too close for comfort here. It's starting to make me a little bit nervous. And I just keep waiting, and you can kind of see those eyes disappear, and they would kind of move like not side to side, but almost like at times, like they would kind of rise a little bit and then kind of come back down and move side to side, but then kind of rise and then kind of come back down, and kind of strange movements on them. And I'm like, I'm still thinking timber wolf. And I'm still kind of thinking this thing's just going to move off once it catches a whiff of my human scent. And all of a sudden, the eyes start coming towards me, and it starts advancing on me. So my immediate reaction was to start shouting, and I started yelling, "Hey," at the top of my lungs. And I remember I'm 3/4 of a mile north of our cabin in the pitch black under, we got Orion's belt overhead in the sky. And my dad's a half mile the other way or more. My brother goes a different direction. I'm alone up here, and nobody can hear me, and I got no cell service. And so you're on your own. But my immediate reaction was to start yelling at this thing, and I started yelling, "Hey," and get out of here. And I was yelling at the top of my lungs, and the eyes kept coming. So I wrapped a shell in kind of instinctively and thought, this thing, I'm now fearing for my life at this point. I don't know what this thing's going to do, whatever it is. So I said, I'm just going to shoot this thing. So I wrapped a shell in and I'm like, I'm going to shoot. And when I pulled up my scope, I looked through my scope this way, but my headlamp was kind of pointing down this way. So my light was going that way, and it was just pitch black in my scope. And I just held right where I thought it was, and boom, ripped a shot off in the pitch black right at it, wherever I thought it was standing or coming. And I jacked the shell out and looked, and with my headlamp, I looked again, and there those two eyes were just sitting there still. It had stopped now, but it was closer. And I still couldn't quite make out the body or what this thing was, because I had the Fleet Farm special, low lumen, like $9.99, headlamp. So now it had stopped, and I'm still yelling "hey" at this thing really loud, like at the top of my lungs in the pitch black. and in my mind, at the time, I was still thinking Timberwolf. And I remembered a story the guys who got the camp out by the highway a couple miles south of us told me. This was 6-7 years ago, when we were talking with them down by where we park our pickups down by the highway. They were telling us this story about how one of their guys in camp got surrounded by a wolf pack. And at one point, it was getting towards dark, and he was trying to make his way back to camp. And on the logging road, he could see a wolf ahead of him and a wolf a ways back behind him. And he could hear him kind of the through the crunchy leaves, the aspen leaves, and the aspen cuttings around him. And this kid actually had to rip a shot off to try to warn these wolves, because they were surrounding him and they weren't leaving him. And so I remembered that story they told me, and I thought, I'm surrounded by a wolf pack. That's just what was going through my head at the time. And I remembered I brought 4 bullets. That's all I had for the whole day. I don't bring extras in my pack. I just have those 4 bullets in my clip. That's it. And I just used one of them. So in my mind, I'm thinking I got 3 bullets to get me home. And I'm thinking I'm under attack at this point, and so I'm like, I need to be very judicious with these next 3 shots I take. And so I just start backpedaling and watching these glowing yellow eyes. And where I go on foot, there are no 4-wheeler trails here. The first half it is, but the second half it's not. And I was in the second half. So it's only through flagging ribbon that I know where I'm going in the dark. I just hang flagging ribbon. That's how we do our walking trails. Otherwise, I'd be totally lost. I would have no idea where I'm going up there. And so I would have to look back with my headlamp and find my next flagging ribbon. And then I would have to whip back, and I saw those yellow eyes there still, and I'm still shouting and thinking I want to save my ammo. And I would make it to the next flag, and now I kind of lost sight of the eyes, and I'm still shouting, hey, get out of here. And then I'd find my 3rd ribbon, and I kept backing up, kind of backpedaling my way out of this cedar swamp, and the eyes never followed me. And I ended up making it all the way back to camp that morning, and it was just kind of starting to get gray light by the time I made it all the way back to camp. And it was kind of it was an interesting encounter. I mean, first of all, this has never happened to me before, and or to any of us up at that camp, but we've always wondered like when this was going to happen. And but it's amazing how clear you think in those moments. I was lucid throughout the whole thing. I was never panicked. I was never I never felt like I was in any sort of panic at all. I actually was thinking strangely clearly in the moment. I just remember staying very calm, thinking, like my next, whatever I choose to do, the next decisions I make could be very, very important. So I need to make them really wisely. And I just remembered thinking oddly clearly. I don't know how to explain it. So when I got back to camp, I just went inside the cabin, locked that door, and I could kind of feel the weight, like my adrenaline finally kind of drained out of my bloodstream, or however that works. I'm not even, the adrenaline that was coursing through my body, I could feel it kind of leave, and I was able to kind of finally relax once I was in the cabin. And I kind of reflected on it a little bit. The other guys, I ended up going out again later that morning. I just had to kind of gather my wits and sort of reboot for an hour or 2 at the cabin. I had another cup of coffee and just thought about what just happened to me and how shocking it was. And I ended up going back out in the daylight, and I brought extra bullets, and I went to a different stand. I stayed away from that swamp, And I hunted. I didn't see anything that day, and I came in before dark. And when all the guys got back to camp that night, one of the first things they asked me was, what color were the eyes? And I remembered saying distinctly they were a perfectly round, just bright yellow, like intense yellow. And that was, that's what I told everyone that night when they got, or that afternoon when everyone got back to camp. And later, when we went to go do a little research online, they say that's what a mountain lion's eyes look like, just perfectly round, yellow, deep yellow eyes. Whereas a timber wolf's eyes can be a little bit not perfectly round, and they call those more of a fiery white when you shine a flashlight on them. The tapetum in all these animals' eyes who are crepuscular animals or who are active at night, they say a timber wolf will be more of a fiery white, when you shine a light on them. I don't know, but that's just what I remembered in the moment, was just intense yellow, like deep yellow and perfectly round. So we went back the next morning, my brother and I did, and it was kind of funny. We wanted to look for tracks because I was like, I want to go find my shell casing. And I had dropped my chopper mittens and my scope cover. I was able to get my scope cover off, and that thing stopped on the trail in front of me, and I was just sitting like this. As I started yelling, hey, when it started coming towards me, I didn't even think of it. I just instinctively grabbed my scope cover off, dropped my chopper mittens, shouldered my gun as I racked a shell in, and took the shot. So I wanted to go get my mittens and my shell and then look for tracks. And my brother and I went up into that swamp the next morning in daylight. And we were like SEAL Team 6, covering each other, both flanks, and just right, looking up in the trees and just ready. I mean, we went in loaded for bear and not sure what to expect. And when we got in there was no snow on the ground. It was all kind of moss covered in there and leaves, and we couldn't find any tracks. There was no fresh mud or anything we could look at. And we kind of did some circles in there. We grabbed my stuff and ended up getting out of there. So kind of where this left me was to this day, we don't truly know what that was. We had some trail cameras running in that area that fall, and we just let them go all winter, thinking maybe we'll get a mountain lion on camera or something. We never did. So to this day, I have no proof of what this thing was, but whatever it was, whether it was a mountain lion or a timber wolf, it was coming after me, and it was stalking me and flanking me in the dark. And at one moment when it stopped on the trail in front of me, it started coming at me, and then when I took the shot, I was able to stop it. But it was just bizarre how those eyes just stayed there after I shot. Really strange, and my shouting. So I haven't told this story because number one, this just never happens. I mean, it's so exceedingly rare that it's like, what's the point in even talking about it? Because people are gonna see this and they're gonna think, half the people watching this might not even believe it, and that's fine. I am just a guy on the internet. But at the end of the day, I mean, I swear to you, it happened to me. You can choose to believe it or not. But so since then, it has made us all a little bit more cautious up there, and it makes us a little bit nervous, not gonna lie. I mean, we still hunt up there. We still go out in the dark, or at least my dad and brother do. Last fall, I ended up kind of waiting until it was like gray light before I left the cabin. I still have not mustered up the courage to go back into that same cedar swamp in the pitch black with just my headlamp, but I think this year I might try it. So a couple changes I have made since then is I went back to the Fleet Farm and I bought the mega super lumen blaster headlamp. I got 1,000 lumen headlamp I'm cranking out now. When I walk to my stand up there, it's like daytime when I'm walking in those swamps, and it's the ridiculous amount of I'm sure I'm spooking deer doing it. But and then the other thing I did was I bought the magnetic kind of attachment that'll kind of magnet clip right onto your barrel of your gun, and I put a really high powered 1,000 lumen 1,500 lumen flashlight on that magnet holster, and I just kind of magnet attach it right onto the barrel of my hunting rifle when I'm walking. So if I ever hear this again, the footsteps, if I ever get charged or advanced on by a toothy critter that means me harm, If I turn that flashlight on my gun barrel, I can see my crosshairs perfectly, and it's like broad daylight out there. So I guarantee you, if this ever happens to me again, I ain't gonna miss the next time this happens. But those are just a couple things that that I've done, you know, to try to bring myself peace of mind. And I, you know, is it a little bit paranoid of me now? Maybe, but um, you know, until this happens to you in the moment, it's easy to poke fun or kind of laugh about it. But I promise you, if you find yourself in that moment that I was in the pitch black in the wilderness with no way to get a hold of anyone and no one knows where you're at, or no one can hear you anyways, you're gonna wish you had all the preparedness possible. And so anyways, that was my story. That's what happened to me. I'm curious to hear what you guys think. I want to know if any of you have ever had something like this happen to you, and what kind of experiences you guys have had in the wilderness, in the woods, on your way to the deer stand. Certainly a crazy experience for myself, but if this was a mountain lion, which I believe it was, just based on the eyes and all the way it stayed with me, the way the eyes moved kind of almost up and down at times, it didn't seem, you know, when a timber wolf moves its head, it's more linear side to side. But when a cat or a lion looks around, you can picture that head and shoulder area kind of moving, you know, maybe even up and then kind of down at times. So the mannerisms of it, the way it stayed there after the shot, makes me think cat. But I think it is something we should have a conversation about. You know, we're not panicking. We're not going to quit hunting. We're not going to quit going out there. We're going to keep doing it. We're just going to do it a little bit smarter and have some preparedness items, you know, in our arsenal when we do go out. So let me know in the comments what you guys think of this and what your experiences have been in the woods. I hope you stay safe. I hope you have a fun and awesome rifle season here. It's right around the corner. So take care, and I will catch you on the next video.